Howdy chat. Do you ever wonder, how did I get here? Why am I such garbage? Where do I go from here? Well, if I stay in here any longer, I'll end up following my past relationships to their final destination, the modern landfill. But what even is a landfill? And who built the first one? And why? Well, let's take a little journey back in time to learn a bit more about waste management. Our story involves a passionate and slightly sassy individual, a court case, sanitation, and most importantly, rats. What is it about rats in particular that really gets under people's skin? I mean, Alberta went so far as to banish them from their province entirely, but that's a story for a different time and country. Nonetheless, the rodent menace is dirty, disgusting, and disease-ridden. They can often be found stealing food from wherever they can. So how do we keep these little criminals away? Well, one preventative measure is to keep them from scavenging our food scraps. Throwing scraps out is the first step, but what happens after the tasty tidbits fill up the dumpster? Before the 1930s, we had a few options. Around the turn of the 20th century, cities had already started using garbage trucks to help clean up the streets. These trucks would take their heavy loads to a few locations, including incinerators, reduction plants, and open-air dumps. Reduction plants, if you're wondering, distilled garbage into fertilizer and grease for industrial use. Incinerators turned that pesky garbage into carcinogenic smoke that filled the air. But early garbage dumps were horrid abominations. Rotting, festering garbage, haphazardly piled, often near rivers just outside of town. These rotting temples to man's hubris were stinky, vile places that attracted many creatures, including the main villain of this story, rats. Enter our hero, Jean L. Vincennes. Our good buddy Jean was an engineer, commissioner of public works, and known rat hater. Despite him being born in Illinois, he lived and worked in the great city of Fresno, California. At that time, Fresno had a contract with the Fresno Disposal Company, a private company which operated an incinerator. Mr. Vincennes would, in the 1940 Public Works Engineers Yearbook, describe the company's waste management process as using, quote, an old, inefficient, Dutch oven-type incinerator which merely warmed up the garbage. Oof. And they sometimes simply dumped the garbage in an open dump just outside the city. Remember, these methods led to a putrid, profound stink, and invited our enemy, the rat, to join the party. Jean had a better plan. In his mind, there was a simple solution: collect, conceal, and compact. The rats wouldn't bother sticking around if there was no garbage to be found, but as any good man of science, he needed to test his hypothesis. To start, he needed a place to perform these tests. After some pushback from the residents regarding his original site, he found a different location, the city sewage farm. The townfolk already had a known stinky place, so using some land adjacent to this area wouldn't have raised many eyebrows. For the uninitiated, a sewage farm was an early form of water treatment plant. They would simply pour the dookie water all over a field. This Shrek-approved swamp would separate the turds from the water, and said turds would be converted into fertilizer for crops. Yummy. Anyway, on October 15th, 1934, Jean's test began. A trench was dug, and it was then filled with the city's trash. A 2-foot layer of dirt was then piled over the layer of garbage. Finally, it was time for Jean's secret weapon, compaction. A big old bucket crane would then be used to squish down the fill material. The material was compacted to roughly 75% of its original height. Rats are losers, so they can't dig through 2 feet of dirt. But if some other creature happened to dig past the dirt layer, compaction would save the day. A rat won't bother trying to scavenge a compressed wall of trash. There simply isn't room for them. After testing the method for some time, Mr. Vincennes reportedly invited a state health inspector to visit the site. The inspector didn't find any rats. Success!
Compaction equals no rats. No rats equals sanitary. Compaction equals no rats. No rats equals sanitary.
Now, Mr. Vincennes was serious about keeping his city clean. In the same 1940 yearbook, our sassy boy addressed the readers with, quote, frankly, I believe the political and public relations aspect of garbage disposal is fully as important as the technical side. You probably all agree with me on that. You know who else agreed? The District Court of Appeal, 1st District, Division 1 of California. That's right, Vincennes during his time as the Public Works Commissioner, found himself in court thanks to a Mr. William Glass. In Glass versus the City of Fresno, 1936, it was alleged that the real goal of Mr. Vincennes' project was simply to make money for the city. It was argued that the city had no business collecting and disposing of garbage. They should step aside and let the for-profit company toss the city's garbage into their soot factories. The court had other thoughts, stating, quote, "Public health and safety require that the city exclusively handle the disposal of garbage, and the intention of the city to exclusively dispose of said garbage within the city limits is indeed within its governmental capacity." It cited Pittum versus the City of Riverside, Miller versus the City of Palo Alto, and Section 11, Article 11 of the California Constitution, which was later changed to Article 11, Section 7 on June 2nd, 1970, due to Proposition 2. But that's a story for another day. In relevant part, the California Constitution states, quote, "A county or city may make and enforce within its limits all local, police, sanitary, and other ordinances and regulations not in conflict with general law." The court ultimately found that, quote, "The collection and disposal of garbage are matters so intimately connected with the preservation of public health that the regulation thereof is the proper exercise of police power, and it would naturally follow that the city would have the right to dispose of said garbage itself." And with the mini-boss William Glass defeated, good old Gene was free to compact to his heart's content. Jean Vincennes' project officially opened in 1937, and for over 50 years, the Fresno Municipal Sanitary Landfill compacted thousands of tons of trash. Initially, Fresno residents paid 45 cents per month for one pickup per week, plus free green waste pickup was available. At first, an independent salvage company was allowed to pre-sort some of the garbage before final disposal and compaction. However, this was quickly stopped due to the mess and inefficiency that the salvage operation caused. Going back to the Public Works Engineer's yearbook, our boy once again brought out his sassy side when talking about the salvage workers, saying, quote, "If your salvage is of great value, I am sure that all of you are ingenious enough to work out a plan for handling it." Honestly, chat, I recommend reading the entire yearbook. The data portion is a bit dry, but Gene's writing is complemented well by the discussion section at the end. It reads like a web forum. One contributor, David Godat, a public works engineer from New Orleans, said, quote, "However, I am still at a loss to understand why I was asked to discuss a paper dealing with the sanitary fill method of disposal. As you perhaps know, New Orleans is an incineration city and has been for the past 23 years. There are also many mentions of dump fires. Check it out." Jean L. Vincennes passed away on January 27, 1989, at the age of 94. His contributions to sanitation shouldn't be overlooked. While his method of landfill construction was later improved upon, it would be the model for many other landfills throughout the country. He made a lasting impact on the way we dispose of our garbage, helping reduce some of the negative side effects that previous methods produced. Rip in peace. The Fresno Municipal Sanitary Landfill was classified as a Class 3 municipal landfill by the California Code of Regulations, Title 27, Chapter 3. This means that it was designed for only standard solid waste. Class 1 sites being for explicitly hazardous waste, and Class 2 sites for potentially hazardous wastes. One problem with Mr. Vincennes' design was that it lacked a lining. Future landfills would be lined with a barrier to help isolate surrounding soils and groundwater from contaminants within the compacted landfill material. Fresno's landfill also didn't keep detailed records of the waste that was collected, although the yearbook mentions car fenders a surprising amount of times. As such, the landfill was likely contaminated with materials such as harmful chemicals, batteries, etc. that should have gone to other waste treatment sites. In 1980, the EPA created the Superfund Environmental Remediation Program. This program was designed to investigate and clean up sites contaminated with hazardous substances. It investigated the Fresno landfill the following year and determined that hazardous waste was present. In 1983, the county health department also investigated the site, focusing on the methane gas that was being produced by the compacted waste under the soil. For these reasons, the city of Fresno implemented a plan to close the site. It accepted its last load of garbage in the summer of 1987. But the story didn't quite end there. On August 27, 2001, the Fresno Municipal Sanitary Landfill was designated a National Historic Landmark. Critics at the time overlooked the importance and lasting impact of the site, instead seeing it as a smelly example of then-President W's lax environmental policies. The U.S. Department of the Interior did briefly capitulate to the naysayers, temporarily revoking the landmark's status after learning of its Superfund designation. Today, the Fresno Sanitary Landfill has been transformed into the Regional Sports Complex. This beautiful park has multiple soccer and softball fields, as well as other outdoor recreational spaces. Though the site still has some industrial equipment as part of the Superfund remediation efforts, the grassy fields covering 50 years of garbage serve as a reminder that we can always decide to put our past behind us. Or maybe it just means that beauty is only skin deep. I don't know, man, I dropped out of college. And that's the tale of the garbage cretin, aka the lowly garbage rat. Thanks again to Jean Vincennes for making our world a little less stinky. And thank you, chat, for coming along with me on this journey. I hope you learned a little more about our dirty world today, my little litterbugs. We'll see you next time, chat.